All right. Welcome to the FAD2 workshop. We're on day 4 already. Can you imagine this 4-day workshop has just flown by? So I'm Beeman with Yooper, Paws of Love. And tonight it's going to be me and Gretta. Gretta is with Cassie's Teachable Moments. So tonight we're going to talk to you all about reinforcement. Really important to know how to use reinforcement, especially when it comes to using that reinforcement around distractions. So we are going to jump right in, and Greta is going to tell us a little bit about food reinforcement.
So anytime that I am teaching Cassie a new, I guess, task or trick or however you guys want to call it, I start out with food. And depending on what kind of, if it's like a really hard task that I'm trying to teach her, then I will give a high value treat. Because with the high value treat, she will perform a lot better. And in her case, that's like hot dogs or cheese or something like that. Eventually I will, not always give her a treat. Instead, I will trade out the treat for praise, once she's learned the new skill. And then eventually, I will trade it out either with toys or with praise and try to phase out the treat altogether once she's mastered it.
So some kind of quick mechanics when it comes to food reinforcement is be ready to deliver it quickly. So a lot of people will use a clicker or a marker word to be able to build in that delayed reinforcement, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But it's all about seeing the dog doing the behavior you love and providing the reinforcement in a timely manner. If you're slow with your mechanics, then your dog is going to actually end up being reinforced for something, not what you want, but something that's happened after. So you have to kind of really be careful with those mechanics of, you might lure with food, and the second the dog does the behavior, you treat. Or maybe you're working on capturing or a shaping exercise. So the second the dog does the behavior, you mark and treat. And that's why food reinforcement is one of the easiest to use for training new skills, because it's easiest for us, the human side, to actually refine those mechanics and get it a little bit easier. Yeah, it helps that all dogs need to eat. And so most dogs generally are food motivated at some point in some ways, but it's still easiest for us to be able to figure out how to do it. And it's also easiest for us to be able to teach other people those mechanics. So refining those delivery mechanics are really important. And that leads into delivery methods, which is also, we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a moment. But so that's, whether you're feeding with that reinforcement from your hand or you're dropping it on the floor, tossing it out to send the dog away so that they can reset to come back. There are a lot of different delivery methods that you can use. And so that's, to me, I'm going to talk a little bit about those delivery methods. And so the most popular one, and the one that most owners are already going to be familiar with, is taking a treat from your hand straight to the dog's mouth. And the reason that works so well is because we can do it quickly. The dog's not having to search for anything. You're able to just find their mouth and pop it right in. So when we're teaching something new, being able to do that is super important. It can make it and break it as to whether your mechanics are working or whether your dog is learning what you're asking them to. So if you take kind of an example of tonight, I was working with a puppy class, and we had a bunch of different objects or stations around the room that they were learning to do paws up on. And before we did the paws up, we were trying to do just one paw up. And dogs automatically like 2 paws up is natural, so they will easily get there to luring it. But if you practice that, slowing it down and getting your hand target in the right place so the dog is only putting one paw on and not really putting their weight on that paw, allows owners to practice, you know, where should my hand target be? How should I be, when should I be delivering reinforcement? And so if you wait too long for that reinforcement, the dog puts the second paw up and puts all their weight on those paws, you know, so then you're past the time of delivering the food effectively. And so that hand to mouth food delivery is really the easiest when you're teaching something new. However, it gets boring. And so it's not always what our dogs want all the time. And I mean, we know dropped food activates that seeking system. And so a lot of times, like if I'm playing a game with my dog and I want to give them a moment break away from the game so that I can play it again and still have it more energized, I call it bowling, where I will roll a couple of treats along the floor, you know, kind of tossing them out in front of me, but in a way where they will roll a couple of, maybe a foot, maybe a foot and a half. After it hits the floor, it'll keep moving out. So if you're training on, say, a 6-foot leash, the treat is still stopping within that 6 feet so that the dog's not actually pulling on the leash, but it's still having to move away from you to get the treat. And the reason that I like that game so much, it's an easy way, or that kind of food delivery method, is it's an easy way to reinforce the dog even more for returning their focus to you. So if you do the bowling and you toss that treat out, they're gonna take a break from whatever it is you were just teaching them. You know, maybe you were teaching them how to go in that position between your legs, you know, that kind of default safety position that a lot of us train. So say you were doing that and you need to get them out from underneath your legs so that you can then get them to go back under. And so tossing that treat out in that bowling kind of way activates their seeking system, making them want to run. And that being a natural biological system makes the act of seeking become more reinforcing than just the food. So yes, they're getting the treat at the end. And yes, maybe they're getting a treat for running back to you, but the act of seeking is also reinforcing. So then there's also the tossed for catching. And so a lot of people will do this, teach this as a trick, and it's great as a trick. You know, it's one of those fun things that we can just kind of encourage our dogs to do for fun, is teach them how to catch the trick. But if they're good at, or catch the treat, if they're good at it and they enjoy it, we can then use that game when we're training other things to make it more motivating, because, you know, some dogs are more motivated by the ability to move. And so by tossing the treat up in the air for them to catch, they're getting to move, and they're also keeping focus on us, which is usually what we're going for. And then there's the delivered to the targets, which is another form of a bowling game. And at least that's what another trainer calls it. And that's because she will set bowls, actual bowls, out on the floor. And so she kind of starts with like a basic look at that game. So there's one bowl on the floor, you drop a treat in the bowl, and as soon as the dog is done eating it, they typically will look up. And if not, you can say their name once, and that will get them to look up. And the second they make eye contact with you, you drop another treat in the bowl. And after a couple of times, they're realizing as soon as that I eat that treat, if I look at my person, I'm going to get another treat, right? So they quickly catch on that, oh, eye contact means another treat. Eye contact means another treat. And so then you can add bowls so that they're moving back and forth from the bowl in between. And so a lot of times they'll work up to like 3 or 4 bowls and then start a pattern. And that can get the dog moving yet again as they're searching for which treat you just did the bowl. And it's also a great way to kind of reinforce that weight skill if you're teaching that, because they wait at whatever bowl they're at while you drop a treat in the next one, wherever you're going, and they'll race to that one. And then they'll wait there until you reload a different bowl, and they'll race to that one. So you're building in that movement and focus. And then another way to play that is when you're working with a potential trigger. So maybe your dog is overexcited by dogs and they want to rush up to dogs. And so if you have your 4 bulls lined out, and distance can vary based on your dog's skill and how much you've played the game, but perhaps those bulls are all 3 feet away from each other. And so you start at the bull the furthest away from the trigger, and you slowly build up to where you're moving to the bulls that are closer to the trigger, each time delivering a treat and regaining your dog's focus before you deliver that treat. And so that's a delivered to targets treat. I don't like to use bulls for that one. I have a lot of Frisbees that I use for various purposes in training. So I will use Frisbees for that kind of target if I want to drop food on the floor without actually dropping food on the floor. And that can be a way around that if you're training a service dog and you absolutely do not want your dog eating food off the floor, delivering it to a dog bowl that's on the floor or a line of dog bowls can be delivering it to a target that they know is their target and it's a specific for theirs. I've even walked by and dropped the treats inside a bucket or an upside down cone or a scatter feed box or anything like that. You can decide what the target is in that situation. Usually it's just something big enough to collect the treat and something big enough for the dog to put their nose and head into it to get the treat. And then one of my high reinforcement favorite games to play, which is a food delivery method, is the Find It games. And so we do this one a lot, either on a rainy day if we can't really get the exercise that I need to get my dog some more mental stimulation. But I also do it as a reinforcement for a job well done. So especially like when Azul was young and maybe we were training in a more challenging area, or maybe say we were at our local hardware store that is pet friendly and we trained it a lot when Azul was puppy. And we were working on either some really challenging content in that training session. So like maybe a really prolonged heel training or something to that extent. Or there was a big distraction like another dog or a loud cart, or, we know there's always the public, let me pet your puppy and stuff like that. And so I would allow Azul to get distracted by that, but then regain his focus with playing the Find It games in a quiet aisle in that environment. And so food delivery methods are super important, just to remember that there are more than one way to make food be reinforcing. One thing that's not necessarily mentioned on here, but kind of goes in with number 2, the dropped for seeking, is scatter feeding in the grass, which is excellent when you're working around distractions. If you're outdoors and training around people and dog distractions, scattering food in the grass and developing that seeking system actually helps keep your dog less focused on the distraction and more focused on the general environmental processing and doing what dogs are, naturally programmed for doing, which can make the world of difference if, your dog may be totally social with other dogs, but if there's another dog walking down the trail and you're like trying to do a go nowhere walk where you're sitting there going nowhere and letting your dog watch kids play at the park or something to that extent, and you see another dog coming and that dog is maybe not the best trained or not the best mannered, and so you want to distract your dog so they're not locking eyes on that dog, and scattering that kibble in the grass can be a huge motivator for your dog to stay unfocused on the distraction. And so, Greta, I want to talk a little bit about phasing out those food reinforcers.
Yeah. So with Cassie, basically when we try to build up duration, like if she's on her mat and we try to slowly I'm losing my train of thought. But with Cassie, when she's on her mat, I want her to sit there and I extend it each time. And so for me to extend it, I may hold the treat longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer, or if I'm not doing a treat, I can reinforce her with praise by, telling her to stay and then up and up the seconds. But I try to build her up to it. You know what I'm saying? I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine. And yeah, it's late. It's early for those watching this, but late for us recording it. But
Yeah.
it's a big one that we learn how to phase out the food reinforcers. Some people may want to phase them out completely. For me, I want to substitute food reinforcers for other types of reinforcement. But in order to do that, it is important to build up that delay. And like Greta said, it's most commonly done in things like building up duration for stay or mat training. But it can also be for building up duration to circling, or building up duration for heel even. Because if you think about it, when you start with a young puppy and you teach sit, you don't want to have to reinforce sit every single time that puppy sits their whole life. Granted, you might reinforce some sits later in life as well, but you don't want to have to reinforce every single sit. And so you want to build in other things that are reinforcing. So maybe now being able to greet that friendly stranger that you want to let them say hi to becomes the reinforcement instead of the food. And so you can, when you build up that duration and that delayed reinforcement, it allows you to switch the reinforcements to other things, such as in the go sniff game that we'll talk about a little bit later. But so switching reinforcements, you can switch from food to praise to toys to social reinforcement to the ability to move, or make progress along a trail if that's their goal. There are so many reinforcement things out there and so many options. And we all know the dog chooses what's reinforcing, and on any given day they may or may not find food reinforcing. Maybe they ate too much already that day, or maybe they have an upset stomach, or maybe they just are more motivated by other things in the environment, like all the smells, and your food becomes like eating cardboard because it's the food they have all the day, and the smells are so much more reinforcing. So it's really important to figure out early on how you can start to phase out those food reinforcers and substitute them for things that the dog enjoys even more than food. I mean, with some dogs, like if you have a golden retriever, you may say they don't enjoy anything more than food. But then we still want to look at, do we really want to have that full heavy treat bag with us each and every time? Or do we want to get it down to where we only need maybe 5 treats in our pocket and we're good with that? And so environmental reinforcers are a really, really big one for me. Sometimes these are also called functional reinforcers. If you read Grisha Stewart's FAD behavior adjustment training book, you'll be familiar with the functional reinforcers. So things like sniffing becomes an environmental reinforcer, and that's something that all of our dogs need to do. That can be super, super important when it comes to working around distractions, is them knowing how to sniff the environment and figure out, what kind of clues they can get from sniffing versus the direct eye contact stare at the distraction. And in all my years, like I had probably 30 years of working with dogs that were challenging or maybe overreactive or fearful of other dogs and people or whatever. And probably the number one thing that I found that all of those dogs have in common is the fact that they simply did not know how to use environmental reinforcers. They didn't understand. They'd never learned as a puppy. This can be really, really common in the service dog world because we get so set on teaching them to heel for public access training that we never allow them to go sniff as a puppy. And so when we embrace their need to sniff and work on it to develop it, they can actually find sniffing more reinforcing when they understand when and why we want them to do it at that particular moment. So some of that does come down to the breed tendencies, and breed tendencies and desires can be huge environmental reinforcers. If you take in point, I have a husky, and one of the things that huskies are well known for is to basically lay down in their environment and watch the world go by. So they will stare at just about anything. And you know, like say they're watching a bunny rabbit, they may stare at it forever, and then they'll either decide they want to eat it or play with it or walk away, just depending on what they need, but they like to watch. I've been working with a lot of border collies and Aussies lately, and they are they're herding breeds specifically designed for moving the stock. So they are reinforced by running. They are also reinforced by gathering. So spreading that food out in the grass allows them to sniff and gather their kibble together at the same time. Yes, they're eating it, so they're gathering it in their stomach. But sometimes with breeds like that too, like you can reinforce their desire to gather by having various stuffed animals. And so maybe you train for 2 or 3 minutes and provide them a stuffed animal that they can then carry over and lay on their mat, and then come back and re-engage with you and earn another stuffed animal that they can carry over and put on their mat. So after, 4 or 5 different sessions of training, they now have like 5 or 6 stuffed animals all gathered on their mat, so that when training's all done, they get the ultimate reinforcement of enjoying those stuffed animals. So if you look at those breed desires, whatever their breed was intended to do originally, and instead of trying to get rid of it or train the dog not to have those tendencies, which is what we tend to do. Another common border collie Aussie thing is the nipping that they do when they get frustrated or overexcited. And that comes from their breeding. And since they don't have the intended job, the original intended job of, bossing that livestock around, we have to give them ways to meet that need so that we can keep the frustration down, and ways to meet that need for the movement. And so when we can turn that movement and that desire to nip and chew and bite things into reinforcement, we're more likely to have a happy, healthy, well-rounded dog. And I mean, that allows them to enjoy nature the way that they do, but enjoying nature on a whole is like its own reinforcer. And that's something like there's been lots of research on this recently, and animals in general, they tend to be more in the moment. So if they hit a patch of nature, even say they're an urban dog and they're walking a park, so that's the nature that they know. And since they're more of an in the moment kind of animal, they automatically just go into enjoying that nature. We as humans, on the other hand, when we get out in that natural environment, I mean, I live in a natural environment and I embrace nature and totally love it. But still, when I go to walk my dog in nature, I'm thinking about, all right, how many emails do I have to reply to? What am I going to see? Are we going to come across another dog? Am I using the right leash manners? Am I following my training standards I've set for myself? We're thinking about all these other things in our head and not simply just enjoying nature. So to use nature as a reinforcement, it becomes an act of being with your dog in nature and connecting together in that environment. So maybe you're talking about the squirrel you see on the tree and how fun it is to sit there and watch it. Maybe you're just sitting there silently, but you're not letting your mind be distracted. And your dog can feel that when we slow our mind down in the natural environment. So using that as an environmental reinforcement can also help calm our dogs and help them to relax in that environment too. We all need that kind of grounding experience in nature. And so if we can put that into a way that reinforces our dog for the behaviors they love, or, the behaviors we love, and then go and explore nature together, it's a win-win for everybody. Which is kind of watching the world go by. That's one of my favorite things to do with Azul, because he is a watcher with that husky nature. And so we will just go sit anywhere. He loves to walk and he loves to move. So we don't just sit anywhere all the time. But when we have a busy day, or when I have an off medical day, or when we can't get out and walk, like wintertime is hard. So just being able to go and sit and watch other things happening, whether we're sitting in a parking lot or sitting at a field and we're watching wildlife, or even sitting, like one of Azul's favorite places to sit, I'm not going to kid you, is at our veterinarian's office, because he's so social with dogs, and other dogs don't always connect with him. So we do a lot of watching of other dogs. So just pulling in the parking lot and sitting in the car and watching other dogs come and go is very reinforcing to Azul. So if we only have 5 minutes to do something and we have some time to kill, I'm going to go someplace where he can watch other dogs enjoying, or at least loading and unloading and moving around, because that's reinforcing to Azul. So when it comes to environmental reinforcers, the top things are know your dog, know what they love, and figure out a way to incorporate that in a way that increases the behaviors you love. And so social reinforcers, I'm also going to talk about with this, because this is a huge one for me, because Azul is so social. So we all know that not all dogs are as social. Some dogs do not really like connecting with the outside world. They only like to connect with their person or their family. And that becomes the first social reinforcer. So when we're using things like good boy, or like I always call Azul the rock star. And so when we're using those keywords that they know are praise words, we're using a social reinforcer. That's the first line of social reinforcers that pretty much all dog owners use. Playing with friends can be reinforcing for some dogs. Not all dogs like to play, but so dogs that are really social with dogs, having a couple of friends that match play styles can be a huge reinforcer. So I used to, when Azul was little, we would do training with a couple of his friends on a regular basis. And we would always play briefly just to get their overexcitement out. And then we would train. And then we would end that training session with the huge letting the dogs have that play session again. And so that made the dogs learn whatever was in that training session all the better, because it was reinforced by being able to play with friends. And sometimes even just being able to say hi to friends is reinforcing enough. And so that friends can be other dogs. I have one of my friends and dogs I work with all the time, Maverick. He loves playing with his sibling cat. So it doesn't have to be dog on dog playing with friends. It can be playing with kids. It can be playing with other family members, anyone that your dog considers a friend, or, person they see on a regular basis that they've developed that friend's relationship with. And so for Azul, being that he is extra social, he actually loves making new friends. He loves the act of meeting new people, especially. Not so much meeting new dogs. He does well with meeting new dogs. But he loves meeting new people. And so we've had to turn that into a reinforcer that increases the behaviors that I love. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the game time. But yeah, making new friends and using that as a reinforcer to get the behaviors you love is a very good thing for your social dog. Not all dogs enjoy that. Keep that in mind. So also with social reinforcers, you can work on creating that, setting up your social expectations or your social bubble, if you will. We know as people that we all have that bubble, and that bubble might grow depending on the environment that we're in. You know, say we're in a large classroom or we're at a party or something, and there's a lot of people we don't know really well, our bubble may be larger. When COVID hit, we all kind of got this 6-foot bubble. And so, I mean, we're all kind of used to that thought process. And so creating social expectations with our dogs can be very important. And so I've done that with Azul in the way of, you know, yes, you can play with your friends when the leashes come off, but on leash, we don't play with friends. That's just kind of one of the expectations that I've developed. Not that that rule fits for everybody. I have another friend that lives in a very different kind of environment, and her dog has to play on leash with friends. Otherwise, it would never be able to play with friends because she's never able to let the dog off leash, or very rarely able to have the dog off leash. And so you can set up those social expectations based on your desires and your dog's desires. But once you have kind of set what is working for you, you are then able to turn those expectations into social reinforcers. So if you take the dog that might have a slightly bigger bubble because they don't like people coming into their bubble, or they don't like other dogs coming into their bubble, that social expectation is that then you as handler are going to be able to stop other people or turn and lead your dog away, or whatever you have to do to protect your dog's bubble in that situation, which becomes a social reinforcer. You know, take Cam, for instance, never really liked strangers petting him. He was more than content to stay in a heel and have me carry on a conversation with a stranger that was only 2 feet away. That was perfectly fine. But he didn't really enjoy the petting. So it was up to me, if I was going to ask him to be around people, that he had to trust me that I would not let people pet him. And so I could reinforce him if he saw someone especially scary, like some men were increasingly scary to him. And so I could use that as a reinforcement by leading him further away and building in that distance and getting him back to where he felt like he had that safe bubble around him. So that can become a social reinforcer as well. It's not always getting close to people that is a social reinforcer. Sometimes it's moving away from those people or those distractions, that other cat, that other dog, whatever it is. And so here's my game. It's kind of a mix, but it goes in with those social events. And we already talked about puppy play dates and how that is a game. And I think most of you would know that. I do just want to throw up one word of warning. If you're in an area where you don't have a whole lot of friends and you don't know any puppies, don't just take your puppy or especially your adolescent dog to the dog park for a free-for-all. That is not what we find socially reinforcing. I'm a dog park person. I do take my dog to the dog park, especially when he was younger, not so much anymore because he doesn't need that as he's gotten a little bit older. But so, I mean, I do like dog parks. I just think that they have to be handled very, very carefully. And most people don't have the skill set to do that. So the free-for-all is never the good thing. The puppy play date is a skilled play date between at least one, if not more, adults who know how to read canine body language, know how to understand play, and know when it's time to stop before it goes bad. And so those are my requirements for puppy play dates. If a puppy play date is going bad, it's not going to be a social reinforcer. So you want it to be positive, and if it can't be positive, you're better off avoiding it versus doing it incorrectly. Dogs can learn a whole bunch of things from the wrong puppy play dates. Mm-hmm. And so there is also, I gotta move my screen here, the activities that you can do at home can be social events. So that might be something like you've left your dog home while you ran to the grocery store or something. And when you come home, this is a big one because Old school thinking used to be don't greet the dog as soon as you get home because you're going to cause the dog to have bad habits like jumping up on you or licking your face or things that you don't want that dog to do to other family members or strangers when they come to your house. And so they would always say, don't do that. But that could be very socially rewarding for both human and dog. So my rule of thumb is if you love it and you can train your dog to do it on cue, then there isn't any reason you can't enjoy that social reinforcer with your dog, whatever that may be. So Azul's not a big jumper. He has never been a big jumper on people more than once or twice. Actually, in the last 2 weeks, he's had a little bit more of a challenge with it. But he's 3 years old and he's never really had that problem before. And so I, somewhere around 9 months old, started teaching him to jump up on me only on cue. And because of his age and his impulse control at that time, I was still very careful not to let him ever jump on anyone else or let anybody else give him that cue. It was only me. And so that activity of jumping up on me became a social reinforcer. So if I get caught in a place where I simply don't have any other reinforcement, or he doesn't want to do the food, and he just did an awesome recall that, was super, super important and I needed him to do, then inviting him in to do that jump up is super motivating to him. And so that one, you can make it what it is. You don't have to do the jump. It's whatever activities that are happening in your home that both you and your dog love. That can be cuddling on the couch. That can be belly rubs. That can be anything that you and your dog both love. And then social events that can be games out in the community, can be like to look at that game is a great one. It can be, this is where the Azul service dog kind of training has come into play and allowed me to tweak the social reinforcement for something that's totally like almost unheard of. And I'm glad it worked because I didn't know when I started it if it was going to. So everywhere we go, at least a handful of people, if not, 100 people, comment, oh, look at there's a dog, or oh, look at his eyes, or oh my, he's so gorgeous, or oh my, he's so handsome. And so for a service dog, when you can't stop people from saying those things. And so when I had problems with it when he was younger, that would distract him and he would look away. I started like upping my game. We didn't do the jumping one there because I never wanted him jumping in public, but I might get my voice even more excited and, oh, look at those silly people. They want to distract you from doing your job. Come play with me. And we might go into our positions game, or I might pull out my tug rope because I would always have a small little, light, gentle tug rope for reinforcement at that time. Or I might get him doing hand targets and moving around me, kind of showing off. He'd love to show off. So like I might ask him to do a bow, which is one of his favorite things. And everybody would laugh. And that would make everybody in the community also more reinforcing for him. But it would increase his focus on me. And so once I would, kind of go overboard and carry on and, kind of make light of it so that I was more exciting than the other people, that's when I was able to build in that delayed reinforcement and that, that other reinforcement so that I could slow it down. So like now I don't have to act like the fool when somebody says that. Azul has now learned that when somebody says, oh my, he's so beautiful, that if he just looks at me and increases his focus on me, he's going to get reinforced for that, which might mean I ask him to do a behavior he loves to do. It might mean we stop and say hi to that person, which is kind of rare, but we might. But he knows in some way, shape, or form, his focus or his act of moving that half a step closer to me and letting me know I have his attention versus the distraction having his attention has become part of the reinforcement history. And so not everyone here is training a service dog. But if you are training a service dog, I would really look at those fine words that your dog is learning that they hear everywhere they go out. Might even be, look, a dog, or look, a puppy. Whatever that is, find a way to make that reinforcing for your dog so that becomes self-reinforcing for them. And they know that that means the community is saying, oh, look, good dog, that kind of thing. And then last but not least, and this one is not for everybody, but dogs that are really social and really enjoy the community often love therapy dog work. And so what you see in this picture here is actually Azul at the library where we do a Paws for Books reading program. And that was his social event. I make him ignore people and kids everywhere we go. And so he knows once a month we go to this event, we do this thing, and he gets to socialize and be the dog that he wants to be in that moment without me telling him, no, he can't do it. And so that has become a social reinforcer for us as well. And so we're almost done. We have one more game for you. And Greta is going to talk to us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so service dogs need a way to relax and let them know that they're not working. So with Cassie, I may say release, sometimes I don't. I just say go play. Other people call it different things like go sniff or go be a dog. But with Cassie, I always say go play. And that's really important for her. Now, I don't use a lot of, I play that game with her differently because I take her toys and before I will go release her to go play, I will go put her toys all around the yard in hidden places. And then I tell her to go play. And then she knows that she gets to go find them. And as once she gets them all, she's very, very happy because she loves her toys. And Cassie is a border collie. So again, that also reinforces her need to be able to line things up and keep track of things. So that really makes her very happy to do that. But you can also play it with dog food or with treats, and you can just tell them to go play and then call them back and then throw some dog food out or treats out, and then they find it. So that's pretty much what I do with Cassie, though.
That's a great way to really embrace her natural breed traits. In that, let her go herd those items, let her find them. They're her toys. She wants them. She can gather them and get them all where they want to be. She can bring them back to you and engage with you. What an excellent game for her.
Yeah, she doesn't do good with food with that one because when she's outside, she's wild. And so
right.
To me,
she enjoys finding her toys. That's her herd.
Yes.
So for Azul, we do play it slightly different and it depends on surroundings. I do tell him go play, like if we have a friend there or something, or I might call him back to me and then release him to go play again. And so for that, we do try to build in the, the come back to me if I call you and then go play again. Or the same with sniffing. If we see a distraction on the trail, I want him to come closer to me and come back. And then I might tell him, all right, now you can go sniff. And so we might do that on the long line too. We do a lot of long line walks. And so if we need to walk, say we got to cross a road, or where I work, we have to walk across a parking lot that has a really long stretch where we're right by the road. And then we have grass on either side. So during that area where the cars can come and go in that long stretch, I'll make him heel across there. And then as soon as we hit the grass, I will tell him he can go sniff. And, so that builds in the reinforcement for the heel, then becomes the go sniff the grass. Actually, we have snow mounds right now, not grass, but it's the same thing. And so that release helps to build it in and make it more reinforcing. So you can teach that game really simply by, you may start with them on a leash, you call them to you. And so perhaps you release to go sniff, you're standing on the edge of, say, a parking lot area or a sidewalk, and there's grass right there. So you release them to go sniff. and let them sniff for a minute. And when they take their time to like stop and look up at you or look at something else in the environment, you call them and kind of jog away from them and they come running. So I kind of call that the catch me game. They'll come running back to you. You reinforce with love and praise and, oh, thank you for coming with me. And then you release them again to go sniff. Now you want to make sure that if they are sniffing something amazing, that you're not calling them away in that moment unless you absolutely have to. For, maybe it's sniffing something that's unsafe, something to that extent, or something you really don't want them to eat, like the bear poop we have around here. Mazul had a time where that was kind of really big to him, so I might release him to go sniff and then realize he was hyper focusing on that and I needed to call him away, which is part of the reason we really developed this into the go sniff game, because I needed to be able to call him away from certain things. And most people can kind of understand that one, because we all encounter things we don't necessarily want our dog to get too good with. So for focus around distractions, you build it into a game that makes it reinforcing. The act of coming back to you becomes reinforcing in itself. And so when you can call them back and then release them to the same thing they were sniffing, it's going to make it even more reinforcing, which is why we like to play that game a lot. And with that, we are done with day 4. We do need to tell you about a little bit of an exciting thing we're going to have to offer you with the Focus Around Distractions workshop. So we've said this is a 4-day workshop. We said that all week long. And we're actually going to add a 5th day. And the 5th day is going to be a special bonus. I got extra permission to do this. And so not too long ago, I spoke with the wonderful Dr. Holly Tett with Paws Up Dog Training. She is over in the UK. And every year she holds an annual Kino conference, which stands for Kindness is Essential, Not Optional. Something I 100% support. And if you know me and have worked with me at all, you know I'm all about kindness to both dogs and people. So I was able to do a presentation with her all about the Confident Canines class that we offer through the Crazy to Calm Canine Coaches. And so I will be able to share with you a special blog post that'll go out tomorrow, just like they have for these 4 days. That will be a replay of the conversation that Dr. Holly Tett and I had about developing our dog's confidence. So that's going to be a great bonus that we really didn't anticipate when we started planning this workshop. So we're happy to be able to release that, and we hope you guys all enjoy that as well. So look forward to that to come out tomorrow. With that, everybody have a great day. We will see you on the chat tonight. If anybody has questions, we will have a chat in the Facebook group later tonight as well. Everybody have an awesome day. Of course, I couldn't hit